Welcome to another childhood bedroom episode. We got the wall of Apple boxes behind you there.
I was just thinking about this because it hasn't been that long since the last childhood bedroom episode. It was in like March or April or something.
Oh yeah, you're right. Which for us is about, 3 episodes ago probably.
Well, you don't, so it happens sometimes.
More often than not, as it were, but that's okay.
Well, yeah, maybe in the pre-show we can take a look. I could bring one of these boxes up and we can take a look at it. That could be kind of fun.
Oh yeah, wait, do you have the box for do you have your iPhone 5 or 4 box still?
Yeah, hang on.
Because I remember when Noah and I were first starting to become friends in 8th grade, he had the iPhone 4, and I was so freaking jealous of that thing. There it is. There's my goat.
Oh yeah!
Wow,
Look at that.
I
iPhone
loved
4.
that box design, dude, with the full screen like front thing that was super close up. That I think is the only time that they've had a picture on the box that isn't direct on. Although actually, no, I'm lying. The iPhone 5 was also at an angle. Yeah, there it is.
Oh geez, yeah. This is what's interesting is that this box says 32 gigs on it, which is a lot for back then. So I don't think this was my exact box. This must have been someone else's box.
Was it your dad's? Because I thought he had an iPhone 4 as well.
Yeah, it might. There's at least one more. I don't know if you can tell, but it's this box right here that I'm pointing at is also an iPhone 4 box. So that might have been mine.
Wow.
And then this is a 16 gigabyte iPhone 5. So this could have been mine or could have been my dad's. I'm not sure.
I also have in my desk drawer. This one was my this is not an original one, but I just wanted to buy. I know it has this horrible label on the front, but that's why it was cheap. Because it was sealed and it was a brand new phone. So I mean, you know me. I like to keep a couple of brand new iPhone 5s around because every once in a while I take them out and just look at them because look at this thing.
Oh,
I mean,
of course.
come on, dude. This phone is just honestly, should I make a video called Apple Peaked with the iPhone 5?
You should make that, and then you should make I switched to the iPhone 5 for 1 year.
Wow, that's a tall order. I think, is it possible to use an iPhone 5? I feel like you probably could. Although, from what I've heard, apparently, I think I might have tried that for a little while. I tried to switch to the iPhone 5, but they're on like a super duper early LTE band, and they apparently don't really work anymore.
Oh, it's sad.
I know. But do you remember the feeling when the iPhone 5 came out and you would see LTE, and that was the first phone that had it, and you were like, "Oh my God, I'm him, bro. I'm that guy."
And you would download and it would be like not fast, but like way faster than 3G. And
yeah.
Like, oh yeah, that's
because 3G, even then, when 3G was like the standard, it was still pretty slow. Like you weren't going to be doing much.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. And then even then I feel like nowadays even 5G I find is almost always slow. Like when I'm out and about, my phone is almost always slow. We really still haven't gotten to that point where you just walk around and it feels like Wi-Fi.
No, I agree. I think it's very hit or miss. I was on the train here in Philly the other day, and the whole time my phone was saying, 5G, 2 bars, 3 bars, like solid connection, and the internet did not work, period. And like I get that I'm in a giant metal tube, like fair enough. But also, why does it say that it has a solid 5G connection if it literally doesn't work? It's just something's wrong.
No, dude, that kills me. That kills me because it happens all the time. It feels like the majority of the time, 5G, for me anyways, is just like a total smokescreen. Like I'll show 2 or 3 bars and not be able to load anything at all. And I don't know. I almost do feel like we kind of have regressed a little bit, or at least I feel like there were certain things that 10, 12 years ago, I was like, man, I can't wait for this problem to be solved. And it still hasn't been solved. Like cellular speeds, you know? I feel like it's been, I mean, I remember in 2012 with my iPhone 5 going, man, once LTE is everywhere and it's this fast all the time, things are going to be great. The problem is, as as the cell service got faster, people started saying, oh, well, now we can have bigger websites and higher definition video and more resolution photos. And, everything just kind of kept up. And now, it doesn't matter how fast a connection you have, almost seemingly, it's always just like a little slower than you'd want.
No, that's definitely true. And I feel like maybe part of it, at least for me, I have like AT&T fiber at like in California at my house in California, like AT&T gigabit fiber, and it's actually been fantastic. I can't think of a specific time where I've had issues with it. Like occasionally the router will act up, or like maybe there was an outage one time, but like it's very solid and it's really fast. And I feel like you get used to that, and then you go out in the world and you're using a cell tower and you expect it to be that fast, and like a lot of the times it isn't. And that's how they get you.
That is how they get you. I wish that I had AT&T fiber. I've been trying to get it for 7 months.
Yeah, that's that's rough.
Every time I try to upload a YouTube video, oh God, that's going to be such a pain. In 1 week when we have WWDC, God, that's going to be so annoying because it takes me like 40 minutes to upload a video because my upload speed is 15 megabits per second. Whereas I used to be able to pop those suckers up in like 5 seconds.
Yeah, that is pretty unfortunate. Hopefully one of these days, well, I'm not gonna say too much, but hopefully one of these days they'll be able to figure that out. Surely it can't be that complicated.
It can't be that hard, right? Oh God. Well, speaking of them fixing problems and hopefully WWDC being next week and my video on it, I think we should go ahead and get started because there were a couple of interesting tidbits that happened this week that I think are very much worth discussing. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah.
The one that I'm thinking of.
I did see a few things. I saw some numbers. I saw some names. We can definitely get into that. I'm actually
summed it up.
I'm actually genuinely curious though. People in the chat are saying "Rip Genius Bar." Did something happen?
Oh man, you're really out of the loop, aren't you, here, bud? We got to get Sam on to discuss, but Genius Bar is over.
It's officially over.
Yeah.
Damn.
So yeah, it's unfortunate. Not something that we can really get too much into. I'll see. Honestly, I would like to see if we could get Sam on maybe next week. I'll see if he's available. Not to discuss that, but just because dub and whatnot.
Yeah, that would be fun. All right, well, let's since our podcast still exists, maybe we can do it.
Still,
that sounds so mean. That sounds so mean. We love Sam. We love Genius Bar. No,
the best bar, the most genius.
All right, let's get started here then.
Yeah, let's do it. Welcome to Drk Mode, the podcast that brings you sage advice from not one but two technology experts And that's not just what we call ourselves, it's what our moms tell people when they need to explain why iOS jumped from 18 to 26 for no reason. I'm your host, Luke Miani.
And I'm your host, Noah Rubin. On this show, we take questions from listeners, attempt to answer them to varying degrees of success, and maybe even have a laugh or two or 26 along the way. I had to get in on it too. It can't just be you.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Honestly, I think we have to start there. It's sort of the 26 elephants in the room.
You could certainly say that.
Yeah. So, well, dude, I'm still not sure about how I feel about all this, but rumor has it, this feels like Gossip Girl. Rumor has it that this year Apple is completely throwing out their whole naming scheme and kind of going to like a car system of governance, if you will. So the rumor is iOS 19 will not be announced 1 week from tomorrow, but in fact, iOS 26. So it is not 2026, first of all. Just got to put that out there. But apparently, the idea here is to standardize the naming convention and make it so that all of the platforms are named for the year, not that they're announced, but in which they are the main operating system, I guess. It's a very weird, very strange way to do it because the software comes out in September. So there's still, it's 3 quarters in 2026 and 1 quarter in 2025, but they call it iOS 26. Huh.
Okay, here's my thing. I actually think I like this change. First of all, to be clear, it doesn't really matter, right? It's the number of the software doesn't really make a difference. But for what it is, I actually think that this change makes sense. And I'll tell you why. First of all, do you know off the top of your head the latest version of like watchOS?
9. 10?
I don't think that's right. I think it's 10 or maybe 11. But that's my point.
You're right.
That's
it's
part
11.
of my point. It's 11.
Oh,
See,
God.
I thought it was 10, maybe 11. That's my point. Like iOS, I get. iOS, 18, people know the latest. iPadOS is the same as iOS. Some of the other ones are a little bit, who knows? And for us, okay, for most of the time, it doesn't make a difference. Sometimes it does make a difference. Imagine you're the average consumer and you don't know anything. And they say, oh, are you running, the latest watchOS 11? And you're like, is that the latest? Like, I don't know if I'm running it, whatever. If it's based on the year, right? These software updates are already yearly things. It's not like they come out sometimes once a year, sometimes every other year. That would be confusing. They come out every year like clockwork. So the year is okay. And then you say, okay, the latest one is 26. Maybe it's confusing for like 3 months or whatever. But I get why they're picking the later year because otherwise it would sound outdated for 3 quarters of its lifespan. One, it's going to be 26. You think about it like a car, I guess, or maybe you're in 2026 and 26. I don't know. I kind of get it from that perspective. If you're just like a lay person and you don't care about all the numbers and it just makes things simpler, and it does kind of unify everything, that all the versions are the same number, because usually Apple releases new features that go across all of their operating systems. And so it makes sense. You say this new feature is available on iOS 26, macOS 26, whatever 26. It's streamlined. It makes that simpler. And finally, if they're going to do it, they're going to make this change, they have to do it in a year that's relatively major. The rumor is that there's a major redesign. If they just do it in a regular off year, it would be kind of weird. But if they do it with the redesign and they can kind of use that to justify it, I think that's how they could pull it off. And once they pull it off and it becomes the norm, I think it kind of makes sense. That's my 2 cents.
You know what? Once you brought up watchOS, I see your point. I really do. because I mean, iPad OS has always been kind of weird because it started with 12. That was the first version of iPad OS because they wanted to sync it up with iOS. Fair enough. Watch OS is weird because, quite frankly, I don't think anyone gives a crap what version of Watch OS they're on.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's, whatever's on it is probably fine. So that is true. And I will also say for Mac OS, it has started to become a little bit confusing as well. For example, here's a challenge. Name in correct order the last 5 versions of Mac OS.
Like the numbers?
No, the names.
Oh geez.
Yeah.
The current one is Monterey the current? No, Monterey is an old one. Wait, the current one is wait. Wait.
And don't use chat to cheat.
I'm not looking. Surely I can get at least one.
Surely.
Wait, what version was Monterey? That was an old one, right?
I don't know. Maybe it was.
Maybe it wasn't. Wait, Tahoe is the rumor. We'll talk about Tahoe, but
let me give you a starting point.
I'm blanking.
Let me give you a starting point.
Okay.
So, Mac OS 11, which was the big redesign, was Big Sur.
Right.
So,
okay, Big Sur.
Big Sur came out in 2020. What are the 4 that have come out since then?
Oh, this is embarrassing for me. I'm supposed to be a technology expert.
Yeah, you are.
Big Sur, and then so that was 11, and then 12. Okay, Monterey was surely one of those.
It's 12. You're right.
Okay, Monterey was 12, and then 13 was. Wait, when was it? Oh, Ventura. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna get that one on my own. And then what? Give me the first
14.
letter for the next one. What was the first letter?
S.
San Francisco. No, I'm kidding.
No.
Give me the second letter.
O.
Sonoma.
Yeah, there you go.
See,
what version are we currently on?
Does it? What letter does it start
also
with?
S.
So it's okay. So it was Sonoma, and now it's Sequoia.
There you go.
Wait, is it actually?
Yeah, Sequoia.
Wait, I have no memory of macOS.
We watched them announce it right here.
That was almost a year ago. I don't remember that long.
It was 51 weeks ago. You've been using that software ever since.
So hang on a second. I gotta fact check this. Hold up.
What did Sequoia?
Oh my God, you were right. How did you know that?
Did you just hit the crazy. About this Mac to find that?
Yeah, maybe.
Well, there you go. Look, point being, I kind of get it. I will, however, miss the names, even though I don't remember any of them because I don't know what it is about the last 5 years, but I feel like technology has all kind of become a blur. And like in my head, Big Sur, Monterey, Ventura, Sonoma, Sequoia are all kind of interchangeable. And I oftentimes also forget what version that we're on. For some reason, the ones that came before it seem more like recognizable to me. If you go back to like 2014, and they had why am I now blanking on
Mavericks?
2014? No, that was 13.
Oh,
it was Mavericks. And then
Yosemite?
Yosemite, El Capitan. El Cap was followed by Sierra, then High Sierra. Even those versions seemed more like chronological or more, I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's a weird feeling. I can't wrap my head around it, but the names are confusing. And you know what, Noah? I think you've convinced me. I'm now in favor of iOS 26.
That's good. I think here's the thing. I like the Mac OS names, and the rumor is that they're still keeping the names. And I feel like for Mac OS, the name is just it's there's still a number. Even today and even in the future, there's still a number. The name is just sort of, you know, an extra little bit, and it's, you know, whatever wallpaper you're gonna get. So it's just like a little extra. And I like that, and I really like the California theme that they've been doing, like honoring different parts of California. And hopefully they'll do some more parts that are in my area, in the Bay Area, but we'll see about that. But I like the names, but I think for the numbers, it just makes sense. And there was a comment talking about when it went from Mac OS 10 and it was, you know, up to 10.14 and 10.15, and then they switched to 11, 12, 13. They made the switch there, and that switch made a lot of sense. And honestly, I feel like this yearly switch also makes sense. And it's a little bit awkward that first year when you're jumping. There was a joke I saw on Twitter that was like, Vision OS is getting the biggest upgrade because it's going from like version 2 to version 26 or something. That was like, you know, that was the joke that they were making. But like, it's awkward. It's awkward for that first year when you jump way up, you know, in the numbers. But once you do the one awkward year, then it's smooth sailing from there. And you know, if you're going to do it, you got to do it, you know, one time, and, you know, might as well just do it and move on.
That's fair. That's fair. So yeah, I mean, I guess if we're keeping the names and it's just going to go to Mac OS 26 Tahoe or whatever it is, fair enough. Fair enough. But that was not the only WWDC related news that we had this week. And in fact, there's a bit of a scandal, which is interesting because 2 years ago, we did our show in San Francisco after WWDC. And the day before our show, we went to the Talk Show Live hosted by John Gruber. And we watched Craig Federighi whip out the electric guitar and relive his viral moment from WWDC 2023. And well, the vibes this year gonna be a bit different.
I did hear about that like Apple is not gonna send they're not sending executives to the talk show this year.
Yes. So this year, for the first time, I think since 2015, there will not be any Apple executives speaking at the Talk Show Live, which is kind of crazy because basically what's happening here is Apple is snubbing John Gruber because he was a little bit mean to them. Oh no, they got their feelings hurt. Yeah. So let me show you what kind of started it all. And apologies for those of you viewing because this is going to be impossible to read. So let me try to zoom way in here. So Daring Fireball is John Gruber's blog. He's been doing this for ages. And 2 months ago, he published Something is Rotten in the State of Cupertino. And this is kind of what started the ball rolling. Basically, this was a scathing takedown of Apple Intelligence and the way that they completely failed. They have absolutely shit the bed. Completely. And he rightfully called them out, only to now have all of a sudden Apple executives say, we're not going to go to your little show. We have other things to do this time. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How petty is that?
I think honestly, it's definitely partially this because we know that Apple does not like people speaking negatively about them, and we've talked a lot about like who Apple invites and doesn't invite to their events and who gets advanced products and who doesn't. So it's certainly not a secret, but I think it's also partially the fact that Apple doesn't like this. If this, you know, this article, I honestly haven't read this yet, and I definitely am very curious to read it. But if it's a takedown about Apple Intelligence, which to be clear is very much deserved, as you said, and as I'll agree, I think part of it is definitely Apple being insulted, but part of it is like if they send executives, obviously like Gruber is going to talk about Apple Intelligence, or like if you don't, like if you're
Yeah.
up on that stage and you don't talk about Apple Intelligence, you're like, I mean, of course Apple is not going to want to talk about it, but like it's a glaring omission if you don't. And so I honestly think that part of it has to be because they know Apple Intelligence is such a failure that they don't want to have to go somewhere that's not on their own turf and like justify the mistakes that they've made. So I think that's also has to be part of it too.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And it's a pattern that's not new. You know, a lot of people kind of have I mean, look, here's exactly what I'm talking about. Somebody in chat, Cook Apple went too woke. Shut up, dude. I'm so tired of people. It's like everyone picks their new favorite word and they're gonna just be like, oh, the DEI woke. That's why. That doesn't mean anything. That is complete nonsense. Apple has always been very, very against other parties. They want to be in control of the narrative. I mean, think about the iPhone 4 leak when the prototype iPhone 4 was left in a bar, and it was treated by Steve Jobs at the time as this like theft, right? Because it ended up in the hands of online bloggers. And it was very clear from the way that situation was handled that Steve Jobs didn't think that online journalists were like real people, kind of. That was his whole thing. He was like, you guys and your silly little hobbies can't possibly understand what it's like to be me in charge of Apple and how important this is. And you like to write your little tweets and your little posts. Cute. Give me my phone back. And that's kind of the attitude that Apple still holds to this day. They've obviously modernized a little bit insofar as now, in addition to inviting more YouTubers in to get product reviews, they also now do TikTokers, right? Cool. Good job, guys. However, their media strategy is still really, really antiquated, and they still refuse to take any legitimate criticism or just address things head on. They never have. And this is just another example of them. Like you said, they're refusing to open themselves up to even the slightest possibility that somebody could go to their faces and say, hey, you guys fucked up, and they don't have an out.
No, I completely agree. And like another example of this Apple behavior, I don't think we really talked about this on the show, but that whole all the lawsuits and stuff related to like the in-app purchases, and Apple was basically forced in the US to allow third-party payment systems in iOS apps. And obviously Apple doesn't want that. Partially a legitimate concern that like, you know, there could be some bad actors, whatever, but also, you know, they don't get their 30% cut and they don't like that. And so then Apple put up these like big scare screens, like if you go to the App Store and you look up an app that has a third-party payment system, there's this like big warning at the very top of the window that's like, this app doesn't use, you know, Apple for payments. Like, we're not responsible if your credit card gets stolen. I was like, some whatever. There's like all those things. We could go on about examples, but Apple likes to control the narrative, and like I don't know. Every company wants to control the narrative, but I feel like Apple is just they're like too overbearing in that way, because it's anti-competitive. It's like not, I don't know, it's just not fun. It's like you can't like talk about them. They can't take a joke. They can't take criticism. Everything has to be like perfect and spotless and scrubbed clean and whatever. And it's like kind of like tiring, you know, at some point.
It is. You're absolutely right. And it's all the cloak and dagger stuff too. That's what really gets me. I made a TikTok the other day talking about this whole nonsense, this scandal that didn't have to be a scandal. And one of the things that this kind of reminded me of is obviously you or I, in our capacity as podcasters, or me as a YouTuber, or you as a developer, we've never dealt with Apple in a personal way. You know, you've had App Store submissions. I have never dealt with Apple PR, but the thing is, I know that they know I exist. You know, Apple. The thing about Apple is they know everyone. And being in the position that I am, and you know, I chat with people I chat with other YouTubers, I chat with people that work in like, you know, PR and management and that have dealt with Apple PR. And dude, they are one of the most dysfunctional companies I've ever heard of from a PR standpoint. And I majored in PR. Now, am I a professional? No. I majored in PR, but I've never worked extensively in it. But I do obviously represent brands in my capacity as someone who uses advertising to make money. And so I think I have enough experience to be able to reasonably speak on how a company should deal with people in its orbit. I've dealt with brands that are frustrating to work with, that have made me want to pull my hair out, or theirs, I suppose, up but not out. And I've had conversations with people talking about how Apple makes their decisions, and it's all this sort of weird whispers and secrets, like Game of Thrones back channel backstabbing type bullshit. To the point that, like, you know, every once in a while I'll make a video and I'll just get a DM on Twitter from somebody that I know that, you know, happens to know somebody at Apple, wink, wink, nod, nod. And they'll kind of tell me, oh, they didn't like that one. Ooh, that one. Ooh, that they didn't like that you were drawing attention to that. I'll tell you this specific example. Back before, this must have been early 2021, back before the new redesigned iMac came out, I made a video where I literally just bought the 2017 21.5-inch iMac that they were still selling on their store. I literally just bought it off the Apple Store, unboxed it, and made a video saying, how are they still selling this thing in 2021? That's all the video was. I didn't take it apart. I didn't, leak anything. I didn't show dummy units of a phone. All the big things that Apple doesn't like. All I did was unbox it. And I got a message literally one day later being like, they really didn't like that you posted that video. I was like, what are you talking about? All I did was, it's on their freaking website. What do you mean? They're like, yeah, well, they didn't want attention drawn to that. I'm like, dude, this is bad. And that was 4 years ago. And now clearly that has not improved. It's crazy.
That's so, yeah, they're like, the council has spoken and we do not approve of your actions. Like that sounds like crazy. Also, like, if they don't want attention drawn to it, why were they selling that thing, in 20, like, why are they selling that thing in the first place? If they don't want attention, they should have just not sold it.
It's not my fault that you guys have it on your website and we're accepting $1,000 for it. Are you serious? How is that my fault?
Yeah, that's like, I don't know. The thing is, it's like, I get what Apple's going for. I get their corporate image of this, like, very clean and polished and secretive and whatever. And I get it. And, like, to be clear, I have very conflicted feelings about like leaks and stuff, because from the one hand, that's what we talk about on the show a lot, and it's like fun to get a glimpse in the future. I also completely understand if you're working on something and it gets announced on someone else's terms and not your own terms, that like how that feels, it doesn't feel good for that to happen. So I totally get that. But I think Apple just goes way too far in the direction of like being overly secretive, to the point that like they can't take any negative reactions. You can't have any fun with them. And it just, I don't know, it almost feels like, I feel like a lot of the like newer companies now are a lot more open. Like the general vibe, I guess, is just more open, and just like, even, I hate to like, talk about AI on the show, but even like the AI companies at least seem a little bit more open about communicating if things, there was that thing where ChatGPT was like being sycophantic. It was like being way overly nice to people, and they knew it was an issue, and they wrote a blog post detailing exactly why the issue happened and how they fixed it and mitigated it and like all that stuff. And even while it was happening, they were, I think, Sam Altman or whoever was tweeting like, we've identified the issue, we're going to roll it back, we're going to fix it. Like this open communication, admitting when you're wrong, being transparent, all of that. Apple doesn't do any of that, but it seems like that's where a lot of companies are going these days. And I appreciate that more when you can have an open dialogue and it's not just like this big like corporate entity that like, looks at you down from the hill and like dictates, what you can say and what you can do and whatever. It's just not fun.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the thing is, I think that the media strategy isn't necessarily a bad one, because there are times where I do think Apple's sort of polish and mystical allure can be a benefit. It's kind of like a Willy Wonka type of thing, where they're working on something behind closed doors and then they come out and wow you, right? But it feels like in the last couple of years, there's been a lot less wow and a lot more secrecy and a lot more lock it down tight. And I really just think that they're not adapting to the landscape that they're in, because in the Steve Jobs era, that's the thing is I think a lot of people say, oh, well, we should just go back. All you have to do is do what Steve Jobs did. Announce cool products and just bring that back. You can't. It's just not going to happen. Even if Steve Jobs were, exhumed from the ground and brought back to life with AI technology, and you just said, programmed him to do everything that Steve Jobs would have done and make him the CEO, you're not going to get that back, because the technology landscape is different. The 2000s, that heyday period for Apple, was a heyday period for tech. It wasn't just Apple. There was a lot going on. And right now, I think I would be right in saying that the majority opinion towards technology has shifted from wow to, I think overall people generally are kind of souring on big tech in the last couple of years. And so that obviously is a challenge for Apple, because you can't be this mystical, magical thing that everybody is looking for, because now they're not asking what's next. They're asking, how do you explain that thing that you did that doesn't make sense? How do you explain that a year ago you announced features that the team developing them didn't even know about? You can't treat that with radio silence and come out of your magic tower and go, hear ye, a new product has arrived. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
No, I completely agree. There's a difference between product announcements, I keep that secret. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that Apple should be open about literally everything that they're doing. When you're developing new products and new software and whatever, keep that a secret and announce it when you're ready. The difference, the issue is in responding to criticism or even just feedback in general. It doesn't have to be, negative feedback, but just responding to feedback in general. Apple doesn't really do it. If you think about the number of times that they've actually acknowledged that they made a mistake and apologized for it, it's very few, even though there are arguably a lot of times where they could have or even should have. But it's really just the develop your new products in secret, release them to the public, and then engage with the public when they're announced, and take the criticism and improve and do better. They would get so much. I get that they want their perfect image, but if they came out, I don't know, if they came out and apologized for Apple Intelligence and kind of just explained look, it was more than we thought it was going to be, or if they talked a little bit about why it was such a problem, they said, we're sorry. I don't know. Maybe that's worse for them. Maybe it's admitting that they made a mistake, and it kind of messes up the whole iPhone 16 line being advertised. Maybe it opens it up to a class action lawsuit over the advertising for the happening. iPhone 16. Yeah, I mean, look, I guess to an extent I get why they don't do it, but like I don't know. I don't want to derail the conversation, but I feel like a parallel to this is the way that the Apple keynotes have been going, because when COVID happened and the keynotes switched to the pre-recorded version with the cool drone footage and the transitions and everything, I remember we were like, oh, this is amazing, this is so much better than the old version, they should never go back. And I feel like now we're here like 5 years later, and I'm not saying they should go back to what they did before, but it's kind of boring. It's like the same thing every time. It's like cool drone shots and transitions and whatever. But like, I wish they did like a hybrid thing where at least part of it was live. So it wasn't just all pre-recorded and perfect and sanitized and whatever. I feel like that's also kind of, in a way, I know COVID sort of caused it, but it's kind of reflective of the way that Apple engages with the public, because that's another way they engage with the public. And it's now even more sanitized than it used to be, which was already pretty sanitized.
Yeah. No, and you're exactly right, because at the very least, back in those days, you used to be able to get sort of feedback from the audience. You'd hear their gasps and their excitement and their applause, which would kind of make it feel a little bit more like you were kind of going behind the curtain, even if it was all just for show. Yeah, it's not like they took questions from the crowd or anything, but at least there was one, and they were saying things to human people. But now it's like, they invite you in, they sit you down, they play a video, and then you go back and, there's still the developer sessions and all that stuff, but they've definitely become a lot less personal from what I've heard from, I know a couple of people that are authorized service providers that have been dealing with them for 25 years. And, lately it's just gone off the deep end in terms of the treatment that they have, the attitude that they have towards third-party people. It's, and the thing is, it's never, they always announce these features under the guise of like, we want to make it easier for you. We want to give you these tools to make things. And while that is true in part, at the same time, what they're also doing is demanding conformity. They're saying, this is our new way of supporting you. But if you don't want to do it, too bad, because you have to. This is the way to do it now. And you have to do this. And I just think that, across the board, whether you're a developer, whether you're a creator, whether you're an authorized service provider, it's not a dialogue. It's, this is what you're doing. If I wanted to make videos and work with Apple directly, I genuinely think at least 2/3 of the videos that I make would have to go out the window, because, I've talked to some, that I mentioned, I have some people that know people or whatever, shady backroom secrets or whatever. And the problem there is, every time I say like, okay, what would it take for me to get in? What do I need to do? Typically it's, well, they don't really like that you take stuff apart. They don't like that you talk about upgrades and things like that. I don't even talk about leaks all that much, but I know that they don't particularly care for that. And especially the dummy units for iPhones, which, by the way, I've never done. I have not done a video on that. And I have not done unauthorized things. I've never done anything that's like super crazy. I'm just somebody who cares about this company and is interested in exploring new angles and things to do with their products. But I don't fit the exact sort of criteria for what they want. What they want is lifestyle. Here's how I set up my Apple ecosystem to my brand new product Apple ecosystem with the latest features, and that's how I boost my productivity. And here's how the new blue color on the MacBook Air looks compared to other blue things, and all of these things. And at the end of the day, what I've come to realize is it is not worth it. It is just, I would so much rather do whatever I want than try for even a moment to appeal to Apple. And that's the first thing that everybody asks me when I say I am a full-time YouTuber who covers Apple. They say, "Oh, so do you work with them?" And I say, "They've never even spoken to me." And people are always confused by that. Like, what do you mean? Of course, if that's what you're covering, why would you not? Because every other brand, that would be the case. If I made videos on even a semi-regular basis with Samsung, they would send me stuff. Google sent me their phones for a really long time. And I was mean to them. I would make video. Half the time my videos were, "Hey, it's good, but it's still not an iPhone." And they would still send me phones every year. Because that's how you interact with the media. It's about getting your name out there, engaging in a conversation. With Google, for example, I felt like I could tell them the truth to their face and they would say, "Okay, we hear you." But with Apple, oh no, you didn't say the right thing. Therefore, you're done. You're banished.
Yeah, that's definitely how it goes. And it's, yeah, the kind of videos that like are made by the Apple approved people, they're usually pretty boring. I'm going to be honest with you. There's no, like, I don't, like, if something's good, then it's good. And like, I'm happy to hear people talk about how good it is and like talk about all the great things about it. But like, especially recently, a lot of the stuff has been relatively small. Or, you know, you can say like, oh, this is a, you know, it's a great product, like it's a great upgrade, but like it's not this like big. And like some things deserve criticism. You can say, okay, this thing is like good in these ways and it's not good in these ways. But like if you just hear all positivity all the time, it's like so boring. And then going back to the other thing I wanted to mention, we were talking about like the keynotes and stuff, and I keep thinking about the iPhone 10 Face ID demo that notoriously did not work the first time Craig or whoever it was I think it was Craig, right? He was trying to demo Face ID, and it didn't work the first time, and then they went to the backup phone and they got right in, or whatever he says. So that was like, that's the kind of thing that you would never see now, right? With the pre-recorded stuff, everything, if they even do demos, which I guess they put demos in occasionally, but if they even do demos, they're so meticulously perfect that you're never going to see that. And I liked that. I'm like, first of all, the fact that we still like remember it even to today, and that's, you know, the iPhone 10, which is almost 10 years old of a phone, that we still remember that is like kind of a big thing. But it was like kind of a humanizing moment. And like you look back and there were articles about what happened, and they said, oh, you know, whoever was setting up the phones, like Face ID, didn't like try to scan their face and then it locked the phone and whatever. There was a perfectly good explanation for why it didn't work. It wasn't like a bug. It was on purpose, but whatever. Like you would never see that anymore, either from Apple or from people like media people that are Apple approved. You don't get to see any of the negatives. You don't get to see any mistakes or any of the real live demos. Think about like the demo of the first iPhone that was like a Rube Goldberg machine of not that. It was like such a fragile demo, and they still made it work somehow. And they were like switching iPhones and whatever. It's the whole thing. Like they don't take the risks anymore. Why take the risk when you can ensure it'll go perfectly? Well, it's boring if it always goes perfectly.
And to your point, those demos proved that it was actual software. Whereas a lot of the stuff that we saw about Apple Intelligence, we now know it was just renders. It was a concept of a plan. It was, this is what we're going to hopefully make. And there's no way now to distinguish between something that's like a beta feature and an imaginary feature. And it's, I don't know, dude. I just think that there's sort of like this confluence of like Apple making these decisions, which a lot of us question, but then demanding, if you talk about them and you want to work with them, that you don't answer any of those questions, right? That you don't poke into where you're not supposed to poke. And I mean, I get that it's an interesting power dynamic because in some ways, Apple does hold some cards. You know, if you're a big creator and you want to work with them, that's kind of the implicit bargaining power that anybody who reviews faces. It was a big thing with Top Gear back in the day and the Grand Tour, where certain brands wouldn't like how they were covered, and then they would refuse to provide demo cars, and then they would get roasted for not providing demo cars, and then a new PR person would come in and say, let's actually provide a demo car, and it would go back and forth. And you can get into the ethical side of that, but as a viewer and as somebody who wants to consume content, what I feel is happening is we're kind of stuck in the past a little bit. I saw this comment here a couple of minutes ago, which, first of all, thank you for the compliment, saying that this feels like an actual tech channel, and saying what's on my iPhone 16 part 785 is so annoying. And I think what that really underscores is that a lot of, in large part because of Apple's media strategy, which is stuck in the past, a lot of tech creators are kind of still making like the same type of videos that they were making in like 2015, 16, 18, 19, right? And I mean, I think the tech sphere in general, whether you're a creator talking about it or the actual companies themselves, is having a bit of an identity crisis right now and is trying to kind of adapt for where we are right now. But this is something that I experience as well. How do I move on? What do we talk about in this new landscape? And I think that a lot of people are kind of sticking to the script. What Apple wants is a day in the life with the new iPhone with this nice camera. Here's what's in my backpack. Here's what's on my tech desk setup. All of these types of things. But I don't think that the audience is interested in those things anymore, quite frankly. They just want something else. And I've been struggling with trying to find something new and exciting that resonates with audiences, because I see this in a lot of YouTube channels. I see this in my own YouTube channel, and I think we're all kind of out here trying to figure out what's next and what's new. But I don't think that Apple is. I really don't. I think that they're kind of trying to rinse and repeat the same cycle.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully something can change in the future. Maybe I mean, I don't know. Hopefully they can sort of revise their strategy a bit. And I get that they want the positive coverage, but like maybe they can be a little bit more open about the kinds of coverage, or maybe taking some feedback, neutral feedback, maybe even negative feedback. If they can open up a little bit more, I think it would really serve them well. But I don't know. It's such, they're very like entrenched in their ways, and it's such a big company. When you have a company like at that scale with that amount of people and that amount of money and products and everything, it's hard to make these like big changes in that way. So, I mean, Apple's a huge company and they've been around for a long time. I don't want to say, they're not a dinosaur yet, but like,
right,
these things, it's kind of symptoms of being around for so long and behaving in that way. And the question is, can Apple like adapt and improve for the future, or are they going to be stuck in their ways, which was fine 10-15 years ago, starting to get old now? Give it another 10 or 15 years and it might just not work for them anymore. But we'll have to see.
That's true. And I think I am starting to kind of turn on Tim Cook. I hate to say it. I think if we kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the captain of the ship, I think Tim Cook is a really, really good businessman, but I don't think he's a good visionary. And at its core, what I think we've kind of been getting at with honestly most of our episodes this year has been the personality is kind of being sucked out. The risk is being sucked out. Sean here in chat saying, it sounds like the question is Apple a zombie company? And the thing is, I think if you had asked me this, people have been saying this for a long time. If you had asked me this in 2019, I would have laughed and I would have said, that's silly. That's not the case. Because I think for the first, let's call it maybe 7-8 years up through COVID, I actually think that Tim Cook was a better CEO overall than Steve Jobs. He made Apple products more reliable. He increased their profitability dramatically. And, obviously he made Apple the richest company in the world. He did a good job. I don't think that's really something that you can argue with. But you could argue that those first 7 years of Tim Cook's leadership was continuing a vision that Steve Jobs had left behind. A lot of those initial products, like the Apple Watch, was something that was conceived under Steve Jobs. And now that we've gotten to the point where it's like, now, we need fresh vision. We need somebody new with new ideas and new products and new vision. I don't know that Tim Cook is that guy.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked about this, that like Tim Cook is really good with the assembly lines, the product lines, and you look at something like Apple Silicon where they have, these families of chips, 3 or 4 chips in the family, and they're putting them in all these different products, and so they're making, a lot of the same chip. They're sticking them in all these different form factors, and it works great for them, and they're reusing lots of stuff, and everything works together, and it all works well. And like in those ways, like Apple Silicon is amazing. Apple Silicon and the Apple Silicon Macs are fantastic, and there's no way around that. Like that's excellent. But that is really not so much a vision thing as it is just an engineering and product lines kind of thing, of being able to design and manufacture that chip and make the different versions of the chip with the different core counts and plug them into the different products and make everything work. Like that's great. But when you talk about vision stuff, like the iPhone and the Apple Watch and even Vision Pro, we can really talk about Vision Pro because, that is relatively new at this point. Vision, like those, yeah, I agree. Tim Cook doesn't really seem to have the vision like Steve Jobs did, or like maybe someone else potentially could. He's really good at optimizing. You give him a vision, and I think he can optimize the production and the distribution and all of that stuff. But I don't know if he has the vision himself. I think someone else needs to give him the vision for him to run with it.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And I saw an interesting comment here from Dario in chat saying, in conclusion, we miss and need a new Steve Jobs. I don't know that I agree with that either, because the thing is, I think if you can contrast the two of them, to your point, if you give Tim Cook a vision, he will execute it really, really well. He will streamline the production, as you mentioned, take Apple Silicon and put it in absolutely everything. Develop an M4 chip, and that thing is going to get used in so many products. Like the return on the investment of developing stuff under Tim Cook has been really, really good. However, the flip side of that is they're not willing to invest that time and energy unless it's going to go in everything. And what Steve Jobs was really good at was putting all of his efforts into an idea and making it the best idea. Even if it was impractical, even if it needed a lot of revisions. take the MacBook Air, for example. That's one that I always bring up because that was a product that was created purely out of the raw desire to bring something into the world that didn't exist. That was a product that was not good. It was slow. It had an iPod hard drive. It thermal throttled. They had a ton of reliability issues, but it had a vision and a purpose. And Steve Jobs was willing to cannibalize other products to make those things work. I'll say it. The iPhone is just such a thing. We think of it now as being, oh, obviously it's the iPhone. But when Apple made the iPhone, they knew that they put the iPod on a death sentence. They knew what they were doing. They were making a risk to say, okay, the iPod is a cash cow, and we're going to kill it. We're going to kill our biggest innovation of the millennium. And they went ahead and did that. I don't think that Steve Jobs, or I don't think that Tim Cook would make that risk. And you see it with all of their products across the board. Every time, a new iPad Air or a MacBook Air or an iPhone, a regular version of the iPhone, they all are effectively tailored to fit perfectly in their spot. They will never provide something at a better value or more advanced technology than a higher tier. The iPad Air will never introduce a feature that the iPad Pro doesn't have. And that's not a matter of innovation. That is just marketing. They're holding products back to maintain this perfect structure. And so I think what you have now is if there is a future device that could overtake the iPhone, that could replace the smartphone, I don't think Tim Cook would make that product because I don't think he would have the vision to execute it. And I don't think he would take the risk of killing the iPhone intentionally on that bet that what's next would be better.
I completely agree with you. I think that makes a lot of sense. Tim Cook is definitely like a numbers guy. And the thing is, like the iPhone became, I guess we can't know for sure, but I would have to imagine that the iPhone became bigger than the iPod was ever going to be. I mean, think about how big the iPhone is and how many people have it versus like a dedicated iPod with like, if Apple didn't make a phone and other people had phones and phones can do what an iPod can do, the iPod was going to become obsolete or at least not as relevant of a thing as it was. And Apple took that risk, and I would have to imagine it paid off for them. I mean, obviously it paid off for them, but like relative to if they hadn't done it, I'm sure it paid off a lot more that they had done it. And this kind of makes me think, I've been thinking lately about like the iPhone Air, those rumors about the iPhone Air. And I was thinking like, I actually want to get that phone if Apple does it right, because I've been a Pro Max user for the past few years. You got me on the Pro Max train. I'll give you that credit.
You're
but
welcome.
My thing is the iPhone Air is rumored to be partway. The screen size is like halfway between the regular and the Pro Max, or between the Pro and the Pro Max, I'll say. And that seems like a pretty nice screen size. The fact that it's super thin and has like an interesting design is like a cool, you buy the new phone every year, you want to at least get something different. You get a different color. That's great. I guess the 17 Pro is going to look a little bit different. That's great. But like the Air is going to be the cool looking one. But I just know that if the Air is less expensive than the Pro, then the Air is going to be missing features that the Pro has. And then it's probably going to be missing at least one feature that I really want. And I'm going to say, I wish I could get that phone, but I want the Pro Max because it has some feature that I'm used to having. And I know, and imagine if Apple, the iPhone Air is not to the iPhone what the iPhone was to the iPod Touch or the iPod, just to be clear. Like the iPhone Air is not the latest innovation, but it's like Apple doing something different for once in the past since the iPhone 10. It's them doing something a little bit different if it actually happens. And I just know that if it's less money, it's not going to be as good. they're going to intentionally kneecap it in some way, and then I'm not going to want to get it, and I'm going to just be disappointed. I'll be like, look, I wish I could get this thing. It looks really cool, but it's just not quite what I want. And it's like, what's the worst thing if you make it really good, and maybe it costs less money, but it's like really good and people buy it? Like, is that the worst thing in the world?
Right. I mean, that's kind of where I fall too. And I think that this kind of goes into another topic that I was thinking about mainly in the context of the auto industry. And that when you spend an extended period of time building the value of a brand, you have to be careful with that, because if you start spending that value that you've accumulated and you cheapen the brand, you don't get it back. That's a one-way street. And so I think Cadillac is a great example of that. You know, Cadillac at one point in the US especially was it equals luxury. You know, it used to say, oh, this is the Cadillac of stoves. This is the Cadillac of air fryers. Like, it was synonymous with the pinnacle of quality and luxury. But what happened is they ended up, you know, falling on hard times and cheapening the brand and making risks and moving down market. And the reality is now Cadillac no longer means what it once did. And even if Cadillac started making the best cars in the world, right now they sell a $300,000 EV that's supposed to rival Rolls-Royce, but they don't have the name value that Rolls-Royce has. And so right now, it's easy to say, oh, well, Apple's the biggest company in the world. It doesn't matter if the iPhone 17 isn't that different from the 16, because people are still going to buy it. People are loyal to the iPhone, and, you know, they're going to keep buying it. So why would they spend all this extra money, time, and effort to make a phone better than it has to be? The answer is because that's how they built their brand value. The reason that people are loyal to the iPhone is because for the first 10 years of its life, each new iPhone, most new iPhones, let's say, were so good that they had people in a frenzy over them. The last 5 years have not been that. And it's only a matter of time before that brand cachet wears off, and all of a sudden Apple finds they can't get away with that anymore.
No, that's absolutely true. There was the rumor that I read the other day that the iPhone 17 regular is going to have the same chip as the iPhone 16 regular, which is like,
oh yeah,
I think that's a little bit ridiculous. That it's like, that's another example of that they're skating by. Yeah, it has the latest phone. It has the latest number. You know, it has a 17 instead of a 16, and maybe it looks slightly different with the redesign, but it's the same chip. And that's something that Apple can get away with right now because they have their brand recognition. But it's going to chip, if for people that know about it, I guess not everyone knows about that or cares about it, but like that cheapens the brand a little bit. They're reusing last year's chip again. And I get that the chip is good, but like, I don't know, it just doesn't sit right with me. Apple Intelligence is a huge one. The fact that Apple announced all of those features and they still don't exist, and they sold phones based on those features, and a lot of those features still don't exist, and the rumor is that they're still not going to exist even at Dub this year. They're not going to fully exist. Like, it makes people not trust them. I think that has gotten to a lot of people because Apple made such a big thing out of it that people actually know about it, unlike, you know, a chip swap in a phone. And that really cheapens the software and makes people not trust them. There were a lot of comments in our stream today of people saying, like, don't buy something based on the promises of the future. And I think that it really tarnishes Apple's brand when they announced all these features and they made a big deal out of them and told everyone about them, and they still don't exist. And it makes people not trust Apple anymore, that if Apple announces new software features, people are going to say, is this really going to happen? Or is this another Apple Intelligence where they say that it's going to happen and then it doesn't happen, or it takes a really long time to happen, it just reflects very poorly on them. And it's like you said, using their brand cachet, and you lose it, and it's hard, if not impossible, to get back.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it took years for, let's say, BMW as another example. If we're making an auto analogy, they blew a lot of trust with people in the early 2000s with bad vehicle designs, and they were able to bring it back because they weren't that far from their original promise. So I think where we are with Apple, like, I'm not trying to be a doomer. I'm not trying to say that they're cooked, but there is kind of a time limit on how long you can behave like this. Because the thing is, criticism of Apple has always been there, but I think it's getting to a point where, from what I've heard from people in IRL in my life, and from reading chat and reading the comments on my videos, I don't think it's going to be that long before Apple starts to get some pretty big heat from its core customers that are the ones that will buy a new iPhone every year, regardless of if it's actually different. Like, I don't think they have 5 years to fuck around. I think they've probably got maybe 18 months. They need to be making some progress, or people are going to, I'm not saying they're going to be dead in 18 months. I'm just saying, I think sentiment is going to start getting out of control if this continues for another year and a half.
No, I agree. And I feel like there's not, the thing is, there's like, if I wanted to switch, like move away from Apple for whatever reason, if I said, oh, I'm fed up with Apple, I want to move away from them, I feel like, at least for me, there isn't really something else that I would want. There's no other company that does the combination of hardware and software the way that Apple does. And like, look, you give them credit where credit is due, but it does become the thing where it's like you're using Apple products, but then you're thinking about all these negative things. If I actually wanted Apple Intelligence, then I would be pissed that like I still didn't have it at this point. And like, if Apple keeps going the way that they're going, I'm not, again, like you said, they're not going to be dead in 18 months, but it's definitely going to be the thing where the sentiment is less positive. And that's hard for Apple, because then they release something that, let's say they release something that's like, okay, it's, not good, not great. If the general sentiment is negative, then, they're releasing it into a bad market that's going to be unfavorable to them. And like, it can snowball from there. Once things start getting negative, it can be hard to climb back out of that, but it can be easy to get even deeper into that. And that, that's not, we talked about how Apple wants to control the narrative, and it's a lot harder to do that when people actively don't like them or are annoyed with them and don't trust them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm very curious to see. I think we've got a lot more to talk about in next week's episode, especially as next week we'll be here on WWDC Eve. So you might not have caught that much of us this year, but you're going to get a lot of us over the next week, because we'll be back same time next week, right? You're here for next Sunday, yeah?
Yes.
Hell yeah. Okay, so we'll be back next Sunday. And then, of course, we'll have our usual WWDC live viewing starting 30 minutes before the keynote. We'll be streaming during and for a little bit afterwards while I plan my entire life and what videos to make. So we look forward to seeing you guys all very soon. But in the meantime, I have been your host, Luke Miani.
And I've been your host, Noah Rubin. We will see you next week, and have a great night.
Yes.